This is not cutting off. Let me just move. Hey guys, hopefully you can hear me. Mr. SALLES and I are obviously live. He's going to be checking the comments just to see that we are hopefully all good. So Mr. SALLES will be checking his phone. He's not being rude. He's just checking his phone so that we can be responding to comments and questions. Oh my God, so close. So people are saying you're way too close. Well. So hopefully, let me just move this tripod a little bit back. Let's see.
Okay. Oh my God, I've got an ad.
Oh no, you should have watched an ad. Okay, so. Hopefully all good. So Mr. SALLES will be checking his phone. He's not being rude.
That's
He's just
not
checking
gonna
his
work.
phone. So that... Okay, perfect. So.
Damn. Okay, this is fun. It's a bit meta.
Right, guys. Hello. Welcome to our first ever live together, guys. Okay, so welcome to our first GCSE revision live. Now, guys, yesterday I literally put out a poll to ask you guys what you wanted us to cover. Literally because we have now less than 48 hours to the first English Literature Paper 1 exam. And the overwhelming majority of responses said, please cover Macbeth. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. For the next hour, we're going to be looking at Macbeth, but also, guys, what we're going to do is we're also going to just talk about generally techniques and how to approach this entire paper. And every so often, Mr. SALLES is also going to be checking the comments just to see, you know, any questions, because I remember last year my comment section totally glitched out and I couldn't see any questions that you guys had, okay? So obviously today, we are going to be focusing a lot on Macbeth because that's what majority of you guys want us to look at. But also what we'll begin by doing is just talking about the entire question paper, how you should manage yourself in terms of timings for this entire exam, right?
Yeah.
So let's get started. In terms of the Literature Paper 1 exam, which you're going to be sitting first thing this Monday, remember guys, you're going to have 1 hour and 45 minutes. How does that work out in terms of timings? For both section A and section B.
I like to divide the paper exactly in half. And I want to allow myself 45 minutes writing time for each question. That gives me time to read the question first, and then what I tend to do, and by the way, we'll give you different bits of advice all the way through here and you pick what works for you. And also, if you've got something that worked well in the mock, don't change it. Okay, so I advise kids, write a plan of the 6 most important events in the text that will match that question, and then look at the extract and find where the extract fits in those 6. Now, you can still start with the extract, so you can plan to do that, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. You can also put your events chronologically and put the extract in. So my advice is, if you want grade 7, 8, 9, don't start with the extract, go through the play in order, or the 19th century novel in order. But if you're just happy getting up to grade 6, then always start with the extract because it's easy to write about.
Okay, so guys, obviously for those of you that do subscribe to this channel, you know that I'm always big on the grade 9 and grade 8. Okay, so guys, for those of you that are watching this and you want to know exactly how to do absolutely really well in this exam and you're aiming for that grade 8, grade 9, my suggestion is a bit more strategic, okay? So for those of you who are aiming for that 7, 8 and 9, when it comes to the entire exam paper, you need to be literally working through it like a machine. You need to be super clear on your timings. And my suggestion is literally take it down to the minute, okay? What that means is spend max 52 minutes in section A, which is obviously Macbeth or any of your other Shakespeare chosen texts. That then is subdivided into 10 minutes planning your response. So obviously you read the question, read the extract, then do a brain dump of your memorized quotations. That's all within 10 minutes. And then the remaining 40 to 42 minutes writing out your responses. That's for section A. And the same goes for section B, okay? So then that leaves you with the remaining 52 minutes of the exam for section B. So this is Christmas Carol, Jekyll and Hyde, whatever. First 10 minutes, read the question, the extract, do a brain dump, and then the remaining 40 minutes writing out your response. Now, for those of you that might have been part of my literature weeks, okay, my GCSE literature weeks, I had 2 of them kind of named and inspired by Fashion Week. I went over Macbeth, Christmas Carol, Inspector Calls, and so on. And with Macbeth and the Christmas Carol specifically, as well as Jekyll and Hyde, I always say, guys, you should try and aim to write at minimum of 4 paragraphs if you are aiming to get that grade 8 or grade 9, ideally start off with an introduction with your thesis statement, either for Macbeth, whatever Shakespeare text, as well as your 19th century text. Then your 4 body paragraphs, the first 2 paragraphs, what's going on in the extract, your second 2, what are your other memorized quotations in the play or in the text, and then your conclusion, okay? So that's our suggestion. Of course, obviously Mr. Salles was suggesting a more general approach, especially for those of you that maybe are not super keen on the grade 8, grade 9, but maybe you're aiming for, grade 6, grade 5, and so on, okay? So that's that for timings. Let's get to it. What is the best way to spend the remaining less than 48 hours that you have between now and 9 a.m. when you're going to be sitting in that exam hall and starting that literature paper 1 exam? Guys, I would like to say that today and tomorrow, put away the essays and kind of writing all of these different essays, okay? What my suggestion is, guys, in terms of how to maximize your time, this is obviously both for Macbeth, but also literally other texts and also the 19th century texts. Try your best between now and those exams to simply just cram your quotations, cram what you need to know, especially for different characters, the main characters, to be honest. Cram your quotations in terms of what the characters have said within the play or even your chosen text. But also, guys, make sure you try to cram key themes and context points, okay? What that means is you need to also make sure you're getting those AO3 marks, okay? AO3 is literally what's the stuff that influenced Shakespeare when he was writing this play, or if you're doing like Christmas Carol, whatever, what was influencing Dickens or the author, okay? What's your thoughts on how to revise between now and the first exam?
Yeah, so at this stage, you don't want to do anything that's going to make you panic. And so the more pressure you put on yourself, the less you'll remember. So my advice is going to be, pay attention in this live stream, because we're going to take you through, is it 5?
Yeah.
5 potential essay plans. And it's very unlikely that these won't match what comes up in the real thing. And for each one, I would say to you, go away and write between 100 and 200 words, closer to the 200 if I'm honest, about each one, where you try to get in what we teach you about context and the themes, and crucially, and this is where students get stuck at grade 6, so this is vital, crucially, write about the author's intentions and fit it to what you're saying in the plan. Because as soon as you start writing about the author's intentions, you're going to get into the top grades. You will always need context to explain the author's intentions, so it's a really easy way to weave context in. So that's what I would do. I would write, it's going to be like 1,000 words between now and Monday, 200 for each plan, and that will incorporate all the key learning that we give you, the magic, the stardust, but you will remember it. You won't have to worry about it because, the exam's really imminent and it will stay in your short-term memory.
Okay, and guys, obviously, as I said, I put up a poll, and the overwhelming majority voted for Macbeth, and so that's what we're going to be looking at right now. We're going to be going over how to maximize the time that you have between now and Monday in preparing for Section A and the Macbeth portion of your exam. So as Mr. Salles mentioned, literally stop writing essays, don't waste time on that, make essay plans. Now, the first essay plan is related to our predictions, okay? So what we both predicted will come up in this year's GCSE exams for Macbeth was either the theme of the supernatural or the characters of the witches. I'm still super convinced that they're going to come up. And hence, guys, for those of you that want to know how to write about the witches, this is how to write the perfect essay, and these are the perfect points. Either if you get a question, how is the supernatural presented or portrayed, or how are the witches portrayed, okay? And actually, by the way, guys, if you get a witches question or the supernatural question, you should be jumping for joy, because to be honest, there's only 3 key scenes to mention if you either get a supernatural question or witches question. Act 1, Scene 1, Fair is foul, foul is fair. That's the first time we see the witches. They are portrayed, first point, as agents of chaos, okay? In Act 1, Scene 1, they basically say that they're gonna, and they foreshadow how they're going to turn the natural order of things, okay? And what does this demonstrate? This is Shakespeare's way of demonstrating how, if you trust in the witches, if you trust in the supernatural, they will betray you, okay? And of course, when you're then mentioning this first point, you can either talk about Act 1, Scene 1, which is the first time we see them, or Act 1, Scene 3, which is the second time we see them, and obviously this is when they hail Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor, then King hereafter. Okay, so you've got just hail Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor, hail Macbeth, King hereafter. Okay, and of course, also remember that they turn to Banquo and they say, lesser than Macbeth, but greater, right? Yeah. And so what this does is obviously when you're writing any essay on the witches or the supernatural, this portrays them as agents of chaos, and in terms of context, you want to talk about how Shakespeare highlights the Jacobean mistrust in the supernatural. That's your first point if a question on either the witches or the supernatural comes up. Then your next point relating to the witches or the supernatural is they are presented and portrayed as very corrupting forces because they disrupt the natural order in Scotland. What you want to talk about in this case, this is not when the witches come in, this is the consequence of Macbeth's actions, okay? So in Act 2, Scene 1, Macbeth has this supernatural hallucination as a result of his growing ambition, okay? The witches have sparked his hamartia, his ambition, and in Act 2, Scene 1, this is when he sees the floating dagger. Definitely talk about that, because what this demonstrates, and this point you want to tie it into contextually, divine right of kings. What this demonstrates is how the witches or the supernatural, either or, are used to demonstrate how they disrupt the natural order, because Macbeth, of course, kills the king and commits regicide, okay? And your third point, your third perfect essay on the witches or the supernatural, so finish off your essay by talking about how Shakespeare demonstrates that trusting these witches leads to one's downfall. You can either tie it into the third significant scene that we see the witches. This is in Act 4, Scene 1. This is when Macbeth goes to ask them what's happening next, okay? And then they tell him, beware Macduff, no man born of woman shall ever harm you, and then you will never be vanquished until great Birnam Wood comes to hide down Sneyd Hill, okay? You can either use that or what Macbeth learns in Act 5, Scene 8, when Macduff tells him, despair thy charm, for I was not born of woman. And then he says, be these juggling fiends no more believed, okay? Use either of those quotations, either taken from Act 4, Scene 1, or Act 5, Scene 8, Macbeth says, be these juggling fiends no more believed. This is used to demonstrate how trusting the supernatural or trusting the witches leads to one's downfall. And the context point you can use here is literally just talk about King James's mistrust in the supernatural. He even wrote a book called Demonology, okay? So guys, the reason why we started with the witches or the supernatural is I personally believe, and Mr. Salles agrees, that the witches or the supernatural come up. Remember that the witches only really appear 4 times. One of the times people don't even think Shakespeare wrote that scene. Act 1, Scene 1, Act 1, Scene 3, and Act 4, Scene 1. However, you can also add Act 2, Scene 1, when Macbeth sees the supernatural hallucination of the floating dagger, or Act 5, Scene 8, when Macbeth says and gives us all the message, be these juggling fiends no more believed. So, let's say the witches and supernatural does not come up for this year's GCSEs.
Yes.
Let's say if lots of people think that Macduff's character is going to come up, okay? Macduff. Who is Macduff, firstly, for those that don't know? But what can someone write if Macduff comes up? Okay,
so I'm going to link Macduff to kingship, because that's really the main context, and I'm always going to bring you back to context for top grades. So that's the contextual reason that Macduff is there. He's in the play not just to kill Macbeth and establish the natural order again. He's there to exemplify lessons about what it means to be a good noble and what it means to be a good king. So unusually, I'm going to dive straight in with the kingship aspect that happens in Act 4, Scene 3. So you may even have skipped this in class, don't panic about it, because we don't think this essay is going to come up, do we? But this is like insurance.
Yeah, and everybody on TikTok is talking about Macduff.
Okay, that's why I stick to YouTube. So here we go. So what happens there is Macduff goes to fight with Malcolm. So he goes and joins the English, and he doesn't know at this stage that his whole family is being murdered by Macbeth. And Malcolm starts to test him. So Malcolm is a really wonderful human being in this play. He has no taint of sin. He's not ambitious. He's not cruel. He's completely the antithesis, the opposite, the contrast to Macbeth. So he pretends that he is a terrible king. And he says, oh, I'm going to make a terrible king. I'll be terrible. You shouldn't really follow me because I'm going to get to know all the nobles. Then I'm going to find out who my rivals are and I'm going to persecute them and I'm going to take their lands and their money, just like Henry VIII did, if you know any of your context there. And I'm also going to take your daughters and because, you know, I have this terrible appetite and you just won't be able to keep up with me. I am a terrible human being. And then Macduff says, oh, I'm not willing to serve a king who is immoral. I've just left Macbeth, who's the perfect picture of what immorality looks like. And so Macduff is ready to not support Malcolm. And at that moment, Malcolm says, I was just testing you. I'm not like that at all. I now trust you that you're with me for the right reasons, because he's worried that Macduff just wants power, just like Macbeth did. And now he realises that Macduff is noble and virtuous, and together as a pair, they're kind of the perfect dream team, where Macduff is going to be, if you like, the gopher, the person who's going to go for Macbeth and kill him, and then restore Malcolm to the throne. Why does Shakespeare put that in there? Because, you know, most modern productions just cut it. It's super tedious. But the reason it's there is the play is being put on, here's the context again, at St James's Palace, all the nobles are there, King James is there, and he's subtly saying to King James, look, don't be like Macbeth, actually be like Malcolm. And so Malcolm becomes a role model for Shakespeare's little bit of didactic teaching to King James. Now that was important because many of the nobles didn't like King James, and as you know, the year before, 1605, gunpowder plot, people are thinking of getting rid of him. Right, then I'm going to go to this idea of the traitor. So Macduff is called a traitor by his wife. This is a really powerful thing to say, and she's talking to her son, and she calls him a traitor, saying, look, your father's abandoned us, and he's taken all his soldiers to go and join up with Malcolm. So we are helpless. And then within like 2 minutes time on stage, Macbeth's men come on and slaughter the whole family. So we know that Lady Macbeth is right. Macduff has behaved terribly. And what he's done is put his loyalty to the king ahead of his loyalty to the family. So Shakespeare loves doing this. He never presents a character as set that you can only see them in one way. He always allows you alternative interpretations. When I've got alternative interpretations, my grade goes up. So I'm going to talk about, is Macduff, although he's fiercely loyal and moral, is he actually a traitor to his own family, and should we look down on him for that? Personally, I do, but you don't have to. And then we've got this idea that he is the instrument of fate. So if we go back to the beginning and our witches' plan, the witches tell Macbeth and Banquo what their fates are going to be, and in different ways they both act on that. But Macduff is lucky because he doesn't know what his fate is. His fate is to destroy Macbeth, and he's super excited because when he gets the opportunity, he's at last able to use his sword. He says, you know, my sword will be unsheathed until I can kill Macbeth, because he wants to restore the natural king and get revenge. And then when Macbeth says, you can't kill me, I bear a charm, because no man born a woman can kill me. And he goes, despair thy charm, for I was from my mother's womb untimely ripped. Ta-da! It's like a super exciting moment. And the audience are like, yes! Macduff is going to restore the natural order. Macbeth, you're going to get your comeuppance, you swine. So,
okay.
in my conclusion, I'm then going to talk about this nuance of restoring the natural order, the great chain of being, restoring the divine right of kings, because that's the moral lesson to the audience, not to try and get rid of King James, but also the subtle nuance that even a character who is as good as Macduff is still a personal failure as a human being because he has abandoned his family.
Okay, so guys, for those of you that think Macduff might come up, those are the three main things that you can talk about. Now, one of the other essays that's definitely worth considering in your Macbeth 2024 question is on the theme of guilt, okay? So, let's say witches and supernatural don't come up. Let's also say Macduff doesn't come up. We both don't think he's going to come up. Let's say the theme of guilt, or guilt is presented, right? And guys, remember that supernatural hallucinations are used as symbols of guilt. What could you write about if the theme of guilt comes up, or if how Shakespeare uses either the characters of Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, whoever, to present guilt? These are the 3 points you could write in a perfect response. Number 1, remember to mention the fact that all the supernatural hallucinations within the play are used to present guilt and to demonstrate how this theme or the hallucinations are used as punishment on both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth for their acts of regicide and what you could call their transgressions, the acts of disobedience against God, by plotting and then eventually killing King Duncan, okay? So, what you want to talk about in the theme, in any question to do with the theme of guilt, is literally your first 2 paragraphs will be on a supernatural hallucination relating to Macbeth, so either when he sees the floating dagger or when he sees the ghost of Banquo. Of course, Lady Macbeth is the spots of blood. And then your final essay would be the consequences of guilt, okay? So, remember that. Your first paragraph on guilt is you need to mention how the supernatural hallucination, the one that I'm going to go for, is the floating dagger, okay, in Act 2, Scene 1. The floating dagger, before Macbeth kills King Duncan, we can see here when he says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" And then he talks about the heat-oppressed brain, right, because he's feeling so intensely stressed and so intensely guilty. What does this demonstrate? It demonstrates the supernatural hallucination has been sent by God to inflict and plague Macbeth as punishment for contemplating, for thinking about the act of regicide, and of course, eventually committing the act of regicide, okay? So of course, you want to talk about that floating dagger, but even think about how his guilt intensifies after he's killed the king, okay? So in Act 2, Scene 2, he goes to Lady Macbeth and he talks about sleep. He uses the word sleep lots, right? So repetition. And then he even talks about, sleep, the balm of hurt minds, right? He'll never be able to sleep because of committing regicide. That's your first point. Tie the theme of guilt to Macbeth and talk about the floating dagger, I would suggest. Of course, you can also talk about Banquo's ghost, but I would say floating dagger, that's a really nice one to talk about. You can talk about, it's really easy in terms of quotations to remember, is this a dagger which I see before me? Then he later says sleep, lots of times, use that. That's your first point. Then in your second paragraph, transition to talk about Lady Macbeth. And obviously the only scene where we see her experiencing intense guilt is when she literally does a 360, right? Obviously 360 is just going back to the original place, but hopefully you guys get it. She literally completely transforms, arguably changes the most out of all of the characters. And she sees these spots of blood on her hands. She's hallucinating herself because she feels so intensely guilty and remorseful. And obviously this happens in Act 5, Scene 1. She talks about out damn spot, that's one quotation, okay? And even when she talks about, all the perfumes of Arabia will never wash these hands, right? What does this, what do you want to talk about in this second paragraph relating to Lady Macbeth? Of course, remember that guilt is also used as God's punishment to Lady Macbeth. And this one, especially a really interesting context point you can make, is Jacobeans would have seen her madness as a fitting punishment for a woman like her in going against her nature as a woman, developing ambition, and of course, ultimately influencing Macbeth to kill the king, okay? That would be your second point, and of course, the guilt is used as punishment, or even the supernatural hallucination of the spots of blood, her madness, her losing her sense of sanity, is used as God's punishment for her role in the act of regicide. Now, guys, your third point, right? So this is your third paragraph, you're finishing off really, really well on any essay on the theme of guilt. Mention the consequences of guilt on both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. In other words, in your third paragraph, mention how not only do both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, because they both act on their ambition, they experience guilt through the supernatural hallucinations, but talk about how this guilt presents itself, and in other words, manifests itself in both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Macbeth turns his guilt and his anger outwards. He goes around on this killing rampage. He starts killing literally Banquo, Macduff's family, and so on. That's what guilt leads him to. That's the consequence. However, the consequence of Lady Macbeth's guilt is she turns it inwards. In fact, she is so racked and, she feels so remorseful and so guilty that she ultimately commits suicide. Okay, so that would be the way to finish the perfect response on guilt. And by the way, guys, I literally filmed a guilt essay video 2 weeks ago. If you want to see like even more detail, just watch that video, okay? However, that's what you could write about, say, if the theme of guilt comes up. How about if the theme of betrayal comes up? What can students write about in Macbeth? And guys, we're circling through all of these essay plans because this is how you're making the most of the time that you've got left over between now and Monday, okay? Literally planning essays and knowing what you can talk about with quotes.
Do you want to swap places so that I'm not obscuring? Here we go. So, a betrayal essay is exactly the same, I reckon, as you can still be in. It's exactly the same as an ambition essay, because the betrayal is a consequence of ambition. So let me explain. Macbeth betrays his king because of his ambition in this version, and therefore you're saying the two are completely linked. So imagine the question is about ambition, you're just going to say, brilliant, it's linked to betrayal, and write this. So, we start with how he is first loyal to his king, but he kills the traitor MacDonald. So he becomes a hero because he's saved the country, and this shows that he is not a betrayer at the start. But Shakespeare loves a joke, and the joke is there was another person committing a betrayal, the Thane of Cawdor. So Duncan rewards Macbeth for his victory, but what does he give him? He gives him the name, the Thane of Cawdor. And as soon as Macbeth becomes the Thane of Cawdor, that is the first prophecy that the witches had, he instantly thinks of betraying. So he talks about how his mind suddenly turns to these thoughts of murder, and he asks why. It's because he is a natural betrayer rather than a natural hero. So the context is, this is a tragedy. The hero has to have a fatal flaw, their hamartia, and with Macbeth is that he is born to betray in order to satisfy ambition. So now we come to number 2, the witches. Those prophecies that the witches give Macbeth are neutral in the sense that they're just saying, this is the future, this is what's going to happen. They don't tell Macbeth that he has to murder King Duncan. Of course, he actually says that he could wait and that he would become king anyway, if chance may crown me, he says. So he knows he doesn't have to do anything at all, but because he is attracted to the idea of betrayal, he then decides, no, I'm not going to wait, I'm going to kill the king. Which takes us back to the dagger, because the dagger points towards killing King Duncan. Yes, although it is a supernatural vision which is a warning to him, if you carry on with this, you're going to lose your mind, it's also an invitation. You know, is your madness going to be worth killing the king? And at that moment, it is, because Macbeth is attracted to this idea of betraying the king. So you can have a really good discussion in this second paragraph as to how far the witches push Macbeth and how far it's all internal motivation. Then we come to the later hallucinations, and I absolutely love the Ghost of Banquo. So for me, this is the most important event in the play, apart from killing Duncan, because I think they would have got away with it had he not killed Banquo. All the nobles have turned up at his feast, he's been crowned as a king, like everything is sorted. If we look at the context again, the real Macbeth killed Duncan with the help of the real Banquo, and they got away with it. The real Macbeth reigned for many, many happy years, right? But Shakespeare's changing this, and so what he's got here is when Macbeth sees the ghost of Banquo, and he says, never shake thy gory locks at me, thou canst not say I did it, everybody, all the nobles think, ooh, who's had really gory locks? Who would we suspect Macbeth of killing? King Duncan. And from that moment, everybody turns against him. So it's that hallucination, the punishment for his betrayal and the consequence of his betrayal, that ultimately betrays him. His own mind seeing the ghost, because remember, no one else can see it. His own mind betrays him, and that links us back to Shakespeare's purpose, that this is a didactic play with a moral message, that you've got to accept King James, you've got to reject the supernatural and your own ambitious thoughts, and love your king.
When you say didactic, for
Yes.
students who don't know the word didactic,
Yes.
what does that mean?
So-
Why is Macbeth a didactic play?
Yes. So didactic means it's teaching a lesson.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's usually a moral lesson. The reason this moral lesson is important to Macbeth, to Shakespeare, is ka-ching. He is the #1 theatre producer in London, and he's just been sponsored by the King. They've become the King James Players. So the King has said, I am now going to have my own acting troupe. Shakespeare, you're the guy I'm choosing. So obviously, he really needs to keep King James sweet. And Shakespeare's a business person. He wants to be a millionaire in sort of standards of the 1600s. And he's after the money, make no mistake about it.
Okay, so guys, we obviously thought of slightly more obscure ideas for your essay. So let's say if the witches or the supernatural comes up, Macduff, betrayal or guilt. However, we also thought, what if AQA decides to just bless you guys with either a Macbeth question or a Lady Macbeth question, right? So like last year, everyone was like, kingship is going to come up. I think kingship is going to come up. And there was this whole frenzy. Obviously, I've got kingship to thank for because that's literally one of my most viewed videos. But literally, there was this huge frenzy. Then everybody shows up to the exam and it's like, oh, it's on Macbeth's fears, right?
Yeah.
So what if either just AQA decides to bless you guys with a Macbeth or a Lady Macbeth question? What could you write about? Because try and make sure you also plan for those two main characters. And I'm going to take Lady Macbeth because she's actually personally one of my favourite characters. Now, let's say if Lady Macbeth comes up and, you know, how is Lady Macbeth presented? How is ambition presented through Lady Macbeth? How is Lady Macbeth presented as a character that transforms? How is Lady Macbeth, whatever it is, as long as you see Lady Macbeth as the keywords, these are the 3 main points you want to talk about in any Lady Macbeth essay. The first thing, obviously, is okay, so a lot of students tend to just have a very simplistic analysis of Lady Macbeth. They just say, point number 1, Lady Macbeth is such a bad woman. She gets Macbeth to kill the king. She's just so bad. And then point number 2 is just another variation. Lady Macbeth is so bad. She's so evil. Try not to do that. Juxtapose how she shifts at the end in your first paragraph to how she was at the beginning. That's more powerful analysis, okay? So your first essay, your first winning essay on Lady Macbeth, instead of saying she's so bad, is she arguably experiences the most change as a central character in this play. By the end, by Act 5, Scene 1, when she sees the spots of blood on her hands, and this is God's way of punishing her as a woman for her ambition. Contrast the quotation, out damn spot, the hallucination in Act 5, Scene 1, with literally when she literally just says the infamous unsex me here in the beginning, okay? Or even take my milk for gall, whatever it is. Act like the innocent serpent, act like the innocent flower, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Contrast how she's presented at the end as really penitent, very guilty, very weak, versus how she was seen as quite bloodthirsty, very ambitious at the beginning. And you want to do that because, number 1, you're taking your discussion on Lady Macbeth from being a very simplistic discussion. We're going to be talking about grade boundaries in a minute. From a very simplistic discussion of Lady Macbeth is so bad, she's just an evil person, to actually she changes contextually because this was God's way of punishing her for not following her nature as a woman. Because Jacobean women were supposed to be passive, they were supposed to not have ambition, and they were supposed to simply raise a family. That's your first Lady Macbeth point. Your second Lady Macbeth point, going beyond she's an evil woman, is what you want to mention is how she demonstrates and make this a theme point. She's used to demonstrate the corrupting influence of ambition. Remember that obviously when we first meet Lady Macbeth, when she is considering the fact that her husband is too full of the milk of human kindness, that's a quotation to use. What this demonstrates is how Shakespeare in his message wants to show how ambition makes you quite a corrupt character. It's transformed Lady Macbeth into somebody who is very much focused on doing anything in order to attain power, including committing regicide and manipulating her husband to commit regicide. That's going to be your second point, and of course talk about the theme of ambition for this second point to do with Lady Macbeth's character. The third point and the third winning paragraph, this is kind of a pro point, okay? Again, guys, I want you guys to try and aim to get those grade 7s, 8s, and 9s, okay? Mention the fact that in your final paragraph on Lady Macbeth, she is used to demonstrate Jacobean belief that women should not be trusted. In other words, it's interesting that Shakespeare has Lady Macbeth as the main character who influences, who tips Macbeth over into killing the king, right? Arguably, Macbeth might not have killed the king if his wife didn't give him that final push. Much like Eve gave Adam the final push, and this is what led to the commitment of original sin. Why are you talking about this? You were mentioning this because remember that Lady Macbeth's character is used by Shakespeare to demonstrate, firstly, the Jacobean belief that women are the ones who are manipulative and they should never be trusted. But secondly, she's also used as a figure that led to the original sin of the king being killed, okay? And I think we're about to be joined by a bumblebee. He's going to be joining us.
Are you okay with bumblebees?
Yeah, I'm okay with bumblebees, okay? So guys, we have our window open because it's quite hot, and a bumblebee has just decided to join us, okay? However, guys, going back to the Lady Macbeth question, if you're talking about Lady Macbeth, obviously firstly begin by talking about how she changes at the end. She arguably transforms the most versus how she's like at the beginning. Your second point being to do with how she demonstrates the corrupting influence of ambition. And the third point being how she demonstrates original sin. Now the final essay would be on...
essay. So it's a bog standard one, it's just on Macbeth. So I'm going to take you through bog standard interpretation, but also offer you the Mr. SALLES spin for grade 8 and 9, so you can choose which you prefer. So we're going to start off with the idea that Macbeth is chosen as a tragic character. Remember the context of Greek tragedy, and the tragic character has to suffer from hamartia, the fatal flaw. So then we have a discussion. The obvious one is, oh yes, I have no spur to prick the size of my ambition, but to prick the size of my intent, but vaulting ambition. So yes, he's ambitious, okay? And we can always see that, well, he kills the king, then he wants to kill Banquo. It's all about his ambition. Mm-hmm. However, he says, I've only got this spur of ambition, and that's going to fall. So I'm going to fall on the other side if I only have ambition. I need something more. And that something more is his wife. And I'm going to argue that it's not just ambition, he's also attracted to the idea of killing. So, paragraph number 2, his wife. The normal...
Guys, the bees are paid actor. We're going to let him out.
Yeah. Well, you let him out while
yes,
I chat.
I will try and let him out, yeah.
So the normal interpretation is that Lady Macbeth pours her spirits into Macbeth's ears and manipulates him. She causes him to kill King Duncan. She comes up with a plan. However, if we look at Macbeth's behaviour, he actually gets his wife to do that for him. How do I know that? Well, he sends her the letter. He's just about to arrive, but he sends her the letter and he calls her my dearest partner in greatness and says, this is what has been promised thee. You're going to be queen. The witches have told me. So he could tell her that in person in just a few minutes, but he doesn't. He wants her to have the letter so that he knows she will come up with the plan. I also think that he manipulates her more than she manipulates him because she calls him too full of the milk of human kindness. Biggest character assessment mistake in the world. There's nothing kind about him. He's a murdering psychopath, as we find out later in the play. Even once he's killed Duncan, he's not satisfied. He has to kill Banquo. Then he's got to wipe out his enemies just because they've looked at him in a funny way, and he kills the whole of Macduff's family who have not looked at him at all. So he is a murdering psychopath. Bloodlust. He has manipulated her into coming up with the plan to kill so that they will get away with it. She is the brains, he is the brawn. So ultimate power couple here, but it all goes wrong because of divine punishment. They could have got away with it, remember, until he saw Banquo's ghost. And so I'm going to say that he is the one who deserves most to be punished because he manipulates his wife. Yes, she's super evil by getting him to kill the king, but he brought it on himself. When we look at the final divine punishment, of course, it's not just that he goes mad and that he can no longer enjoy being king and that the witches toy with his mind, and he thinks he's going to survive in battle and he doesn't. The real despair in the play is when Lady Macbeth dies. So I'm going to argue that he is actually in love with his wife. He's not just manipulating her because he's cruel, he's manipulating her because he knows he's going to deliver what she wants, which is being queen, my dearest partner in greatness again. And when she dies, he becomes nihilistic. So nihilism is a belief that life has no meaning. Now, to a Christian, that's appalling because God gives your life meaning and your religion gives your life meaning. But Macbeth rejects that. That, of course, invites the divine punishment from God again. But Shakespeare also does that to make us partly sympathetic with Macbeth because we can see the despair that he's led to. And that despair isn't because he's going to lose the battle, it's because he's lost his wife. So that's going to be my conclusion. It's the loss of Lady Macbeth that makes his ending so sad, because fate has already decided he was going to get killed anyway. That's not the important ending from our point of view as the audience. The ending is how all his hopes are destroyed and how he can't even believe that life has any meaning because of the death of his wife.
Okay, so guys, the reason why we went over essay plans, especially for those of you that might be joining now, is because literally I started by saying you have less than 48 hours to the first literature paper 1 English GCSE exam on Monday. First thing in the morning, okay, nice and early. What that therefore means is you don't have time between now and Monday to be just doing a bunch of 1 hour 45-minute essays, okay? And a better use of your time between now and Monday is try to firstly cram key quotations for all the main characters, but also, guys, think about what you would write on if different topics came up. And of course, what we then went over is the topic areas we think could come up, but also say if AQA just decides to bless you guys with a Macbeth or a Lady Macbeth question, the points you can talk about if you got like a really straightforward question, okay? So before we wrap up today, right, and the reason why we're looking at Macbeth, guys, is because that's what you guys voted, okay? So obviously for those of you who are like, oh, I wish you'd covered this, well, vote so that we can cover that, okay? However, before we wrap up, I don't know if you're looking at any of the comments.
Should we do some questions from the comments?
If there's any answers. And also what I was keen on is your thoughts on grade boundaries. Do you think these exams are going to be harder to pass or not?
So someone has actually put that in caps here. So we'll start with the
grade boundaries. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want me to go first on this one?
You go.
So grade boundaries are not set in advance, okay? However, there is something called comparable outcomes. And so what that means is the exam board sit down and they don't know if this exam is as hard as last year's or the year before until people do it, okay? So it might be easier, in which case they'd have to make the grade boundaries higher, or it might be more difficult, in which case they'd make them lower. But the other thing is, how do they judge whether it's easier or harder? So one of the things they do, I think, is insane, but it's the way they do it. They say, right, what did the whole country get in their SATs in year 6? And then we'll use that to predict what they will get at their GCSEs. So if loads of people did well in their SATs in year 6, then we have to give more grades 7, 8 and 9. If they didn't do as well, we have to give fewer grades 7, 8 and 9. Okay. So that's how the boundaries are set. The other thing that they do is they're not allowed to deviate by more than about 1% from last year. Yeah, unless like we've got COVID, but outside of an emergency like that, they have to be really close.
And how is last year's grade boundaries?
So I've no idea. I write them down every year. Can you remember the percentages for each? No.
We obviously don't think it's that deep, the grade boundaries.
So the grade boundaries are roughly a 10% jump between grade 4 to 5 to 6 and so on, roughly. But what there always is a massive number of marks you can get in grade 9. Like hardly anyone gets there because most students don't revise enough. And so this brings me to my second point about grade boundaries. I've got an app on my computer that allows me to check my views compared to any other YouTuber. So I've checked your views and I've checked Mr. Everything English views, because I'm looking at my views and I'm thinking, last year, students were like, they were revising more. Is it just my channel? And it's not.
Yeah.
Like everywhere,
Students are
across
not revising
they're
as
not
much.
revising as much. So if you're here and you're revising, you're going to move higher up the grade boundaries.
Easily.
Yeah.
So obviously, guys, if you're on this live, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, I'm claiming that all of you guys are going to get 7s and 8s,
Yeah.
okay? So I'm claiming that for you guys. But also, I personally feel that, I'm going to just add a little bit of kind of observation.
Yeah.
I personally feel if a Lady Macbeth or a Macbeth question were to come up, I do think that the grade boundaries would be a little bit higher.
Because it's easier.
Only because it's
Yeah.
easier, okay? So to some extent, obviously, guys, if, say, a non-Macbeth or Lady Macbeth question comes up, say the witches, well, also another reason why you should be jumping for joy is because the grade boundaries will be lower, because it's going to be the first time something of that question of that nature has come up, meaning AQA will understand that a lot of students will find it a bit more challenging than, say, just a standard Macbeth or Lady Macbeth question, okay? So, of course, either way, guys, especially if you're tuning into this live, you're going to do really well, right? So either way, if you get a Lady Macbeth or Macbeth question, we'll smash that and talk about the points that we've talked about. However, your grade boundaries will definitely probably be much higher, okay? So, you know, there's going to probably be fewer students who are hitting 8s, 9s, or even 7s. However, I think if one of these questions comes up, I think the grade boundary will be lowered.
Yeah.
Okay.
And other people won't have revised this, so you
there we
guys
go.
will be
There we
kings
go.
and queens of the GCSE.
And especially those guys who are part of my masterclasses, you guys are like now elite, okay? So 100% I think it's going to do really well.
So, can you save the live?
Can you save the live?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
guys, by the way, the live is going to be available. It's usually once
always
finished.
available.
Yeah, so guys, I did like
Yeah.
a bunch of live streams last year.
Yeah.
And it's just it's like public, okay? So
Yeah.
it's gonna I'm pretty sure it's gonna be available. And
Yeah.
oh, and by the way, for those of you who are keen beans, I will be doing another live stream tomorrow, guys. Okay, I think I might do a Macbeth kind of like final last minute mind map of like quotations and stuff. I might put out a poll, okay? So I might put a poll and then just see. But I think it probably is gonna be like a Macbeth mind map. Key quotes, context, just like last minute revision cramming, okay?
Okay.
But yeah, this live should be available.
Brilliant. It's difficult to find lives, so if you go to the top of your page, you'll have videos, shorts, and then lives, and
yeah.
click on the lives.
And I'll post it on the community page as well, so I'll like put the link to it as well.
Okay. God, these questions are coming too quick. Can you explain what kingship is? No. Watch the live again. We've done that
the video
perfectly.
even.
Yeah.
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 Main thing about kingship, by the way, guys, is just purely this idea that Shakespeare wanted to present: when the rightful king is in charge, order is within a country, it's restored. When the wrongful king is in charge, chaos ensues. Guys, I also have literally a 10-minute kingship video on the perfect kingship essay. I personally don't think kingship is going to come up this year, honestly. Obviously, I might jinx it, so in case you don't want to be jinxed, just watch that video. It's a 10-minute video on kingship,
Yeah.
okay?
I get this all the time. Is this for AQA or EdXL?
It's literally for any
Every
kingship
single-
question, okay? So all the kind of perfect essay videos that I've done, guys, literally it's for any exam syllabus, right? AQA, EdXL,
Yeah.
whatever.
And it's the same with this. This
Literally.
fits every exam board.
Yeah, yeah.
Because Shakespeare's message doesn't change according to the exam board you're studying.
Yeah, the only exception is just when we started off talking about timings, because I know, for example, with EdXL, you've got obviously part A and part B for Macbeth, and then of course you've also got the second section, which is in spectacles or your modern stuff, right? So obviously that changes just a little bit, but the content stays the same.
Right,
All right.
it's going mad.
There's too many comments.
How can we link the witches to betrayal?
Oh,
Go for
actually, there's something you mentioned about the witches to betrayal.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the witches. Okay, so before whilst we were planning this, I actually had a slightly different approach in terms of the witches on betrayal. I personally believe that the witches do betray Macbeth. They never lie to him. Okay, so guys, also that's another thing I forgot to mention when we're talking about the witches and the supernatural. Guys, students say this all the time, and it is wrong. It's categorically wrong. They say the witches lie to Macbeth. The witches tell him misleading information. No, they don't. They speak in what is called half-truths and equivocations. But because they only give him a part of the truth, they never lie, Macbeth acts on partial information, and that leads him to make mistakes, which causes his downfall. When it comes to the idea of betrayal and the theme of betrayal, Mr. SALLES, when he was going over betrayal, he said actually the witches do not betray Macbeth. I personally believe they do deliberately speak in half-truths in order to cause Macbeth's downfall. Because remember that the witches, they're just there they exist to just cause chaos. They don't like to see happiness. They don't like to see order. That's why even in Act 1, Scene 1, they're talking about when the hurly-burly's done. In other words, they're saying, let's not do anything. Right now, there's this massive war. We're really happy. We're happy to see that there's all this chaos in Scotland. Let's wait until the war is won. Then we're going to then talk to Macbeth, cause him plot the seeds of ambition in his mind, and then that's going to cause more hurly-burly. Hence, if you are talking about the witches from my perspective in the question of betrayal, I would say make the argument that the witches do deliberately betray Macbeth. They don't lie to him, but they do betray him by speaking in half-truths and equivocations when they say, "Hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter." But of course, also when they say lesser than Macbeth, but greater to Banquo, that drives a wedge between him and his friend. But of course, then it plants the seeds of ambition in Macbeth's mind. And this is what leads him to kill the king. What also demonstrates how the witches do deliberately betray Macbeth and cause him to become corrupted is also how they observe how well they've worked on him. When they see him in Act 4, Scene 1, they say, something wicked this way comes. They're like, great, we've made him so wicked, look at him. And so I personally believe that if you're talking about betrayal, the witches do deliberately betray Macbeth. And even at the end, guys, another quotation, "Be these juggling fiends no more believed." That's what Macbeth says about the witches betraying him and causing his own downfall. But you had a different opinion.
Yeah, I think that's Macbeth trying to not admit to himself that it was all his own idea. And that I love that quote, "By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this may comes." But to me, that's the witches saying, "Think we're bad. It's Macbeth who's coming." And that wickedness, for me, has always been there. It's always been there. All they've done is just brought it out into the open. And that fits with the idea of the context of a tragedy. So in Greek tragedy, it's the hero's own flaw that causes their fate. Nobody acts on them. So you can argue both ways, and both ways get you grade 9. So don't stress about it.
There we go.
Right, really good question.
Uh-huh.
What about Banquo? What if he comes up?
Ooh, actually, guys, Banquo did come up, right?
Yeah.
Remember wasn't the 2018 question, which was how Macbeth and Banquo are used to convey their attitudes towards the supernatural? So Banquo has come up.
Yes.
I don't think you get a Banquo question by itself, because
Yes.
I don't think there's enough on Banquo.
Yeah.
Similarly, obviously, guys, I'm a TikTok girl, so I've seen Macduff. Everyone's talking about Macduff. I don't think Macduff is going to come up, but I did still, suggest that we look at Macduff. I don't think people like Macduff or Banquo are going to come up because there's not enough substantial evidence and, different scenes where we see their transformation. Also, in contrast to someone like Macbeth or Lady Macbeth, is this kind of interesting character arc, right? This development in the characters. Obviously, the witches, they don't really develop, right? They're just they're evil at the beginning, they're evil at the end. They just disappear, right? But they're still obviously interesting in the sense that they cause all of the chaos that happens. However, let's say if Banquo comes up, right? I don't think Banquo there's enough, because really there's only a few times we see Banquo. We hear of Banquo in Act 1, Scene 2. This is where we're told they were as 2 spent swimmers, but they still kept on fighting. We then obviously see Macbeth, who asks the witches' prophecies in Act 1, Scene 3. The next time we see Banquo is just before the banquet, right? This is when, actually, before Macbeth kills King Duncan, he talks about this husbandry in heaven. He notices that, nature is not really acting as it should, and this is foreshadowing that Macbeth is going to kill the king. And then the final time before the ghost of Banquo is when he's with his son, and, he then says, "Fly, fly, fleance, I've been betrayed," right? I think if you talked about Banquo, your first point should be how he demonstrates the theme of loyalty, because he remains the ideal model of the Jacobean man. He gets his prophecy from the witches, lesser than Macbeth but greater, because his kids are going to be kings, but he doesn't do anything about it. He just lets fate take its course, okay? So that would be your first point to do with Banquo. The second point is, of course, when we realize that he trusts appearances too much, okay? Remember that appearances is used as a key theme. So this is appearances and reality. And the people who are mistrusting of appearances survive. Macduff doesn't trust what he sees. He goes off to England. Malcolm and Donalbain say, I don't think the groomsmen were the ones who killed my dad. They've run off to Ireland and England. Banquo trusts appearances. Just like King Duncan. Remember, King Duncan says there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He trusts appearances. What happens to those that trust appearances? They die. That will be a second point about Banquo. Finish off with, of course, the ghost of Banquo. He is used to torment Macbeth. That will be a third point, right? When Macbeth is like, never shake that gory locks at me. He is used as a supernatural hallucination that torments Macbeth. That's what I would say on an essay on Banquo, which I don't think will come up.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he'll come up. But the easy way to use him and not waste this time is that he's always relevant to any essay on Macbeth and lots of the themes. So the key thing that Shakespeare is up to with Banquo is that he's changed the history. So I told you how the context was changed. Banquo was originally a murderer. Why did he do that? Well, because people believe that King James was descended from Banquo. And Shakespeare can't put that on stage because King James is watching, so he tries to remodel Banquo as a heroic figure. In terms of the structure of the play, he is then the antithesis. Use that word, it means the opposite, but it's a deliberate contrast. So Shakespeare uses him as the antithesis to Macbeth to say that this is the way Macbeth went, he should have gone the way Banquo went, he is a noble man. However, we always love an alternative interpretation and a bit of nuance for grades 8 and 9. Let's think about Banquo. He warns Macbeth and says, the instruments of darkness try to win us to our harm, commencing with the truth. So he knows the witches are going to send Macbeth off in some evil pursuit. He knows his friend and he knows what the witches are like. But they say that his sons will become king. Now, what's crucial then is when he's talking about the husbandry in heaven, he's also talking about Macbeth, and he says, I fear thou plays most foully for becoming king. So Banquo knows what Macbeth has done, but he doesn't tell anyone. Why not? Well, Fleance is a young boy. You know, he's probably about 10 years old. So Banquo knows for the witch's prophecy to come true, Macbeth can't stop being king now. Yeah, because then Fleance isn't ready to be king. He needs Macbeth for a time. Actually, that turns out to be wrong, because Fleance is going to become king after Malcolm at some stage, if the witch is right. But that's the gamble that Banquo takes. Yes, he's a noble character, but also his silence and his refusal to tell anyone about Macbeth is also what leads him to be divinely punished. So he's killed because he hasn't stopped Macbeth by telling everyone what he's done. But remember, fate uses him as an instrument by cruelly using Banquo's ghost to reveal to all the nobles that Macbeth has killed Duncan. So that's where I'd go with Banquo.
Right, okay, so are we running over time? Do we need to
we've got 3 minutes of official time.
Okay, so
do you want another question?
Yeah, we can get a few more questions.
Okay. Can you write a grade 9 fate essay?
Ooh. That's like a pro question. Okay, so let's do it. So fate and free will, right?
Yes.
That's a key theme.
Yes.
Okay, so firstly, when it comes to the theme of fate and free will, right, what's your perspective?
I am going with Macbeth has complete free will not to commit regicide and just to let fate take its toll, and therefore he can keep acting without trying to bring his fate about. And the interesting thing is, in a Greek tragedy, the hero tries everything possible not to get the fate to come true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always a negative fate. In this play, Shakespeare completely reverses it. It's a positive fate for Macbeth, and he tries everything he can to gain it. Now, interestingly, once he's become king, he's just following fate. Where it all goes wrong is when he challenges fate by trying to kill Banquo and Fleance. Okay. Because fate said, hey, Fleance is going to become king. And so if Macbeth had just accepted his fate, everything would have been fine. And this brings us back to the divine right of kings, because the king is appointed by God, God decides on the fate. And so, ironically, if Macbeth had not killed Duncan, then he would have been a happy king, and then at some point, Fleance would have become king, but there would have been no tragedy.
Okay, well, I take a very different view, guys. when it comes to the theme of fate and free will, Shakespeare, my interpretation, uses this theme to demonstrate the tragedy that ensues when we don't accept our fate. The only two characters in this play that reject their fate, and of course they end up dying, are Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Banquo follows his fate. So does Macduff, right? Macduff kills the king, but instead of saying, I'm now going to take the power because I've killed the king, he hands the crown back over to Malcolm, okay? Now, I would suggest, so this is my interpretation of fate and free will, Shakespeare uses this theme as a warning to his Jacobean audience. He's showing this in the new court of King James. People are saying, hang on, we don't even have an English king anymore, right? Because our Queen Elizabeth I, died. She had no heirs. We've got this guy from Scotland. And Shakespeare is trying to subliminally tell them, yeah, okay, cool, we have this king from Scotland, but that's what God has planned for us. We need to accept him, because look at this tragedy. If we don't accept him, this is what's going to happen to our beloved country, UK, just like what happened in Scotland, okay? So this is a very long-winded way of me saying I actually think the play is centered around the idea that Shakespeare wants to present to his audience and the entire court, that we must all accept our fate. Remember that this play was written at a time where England had just come out of the feudal system. Feudal system is you've got this hierarchy, right? So you've got God at the top, then the king, the noblemen, blah, 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 peasants, and then animals, and then the devil. This was a very rigid hierarchical structure. And anyone, things like ambition, right? Today, ambition is something that's celebrated, you know, starting poor and then becoming really rich. The American dream, for example. At that time, during Shakespeare's time, trying to be ambitious and go up this natural hierarchy that's been established, which came from the feudal system, was seen as destabilizing society. Hence, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's ambition, which is going against their fate, because really, I don't think Macbeth, his fate was to be king. His fate was to stay as Thane of Cawdor and just to be happy as a nobleman. He tries to exercise free will, and what happens when he tries to exercise free will? He is punished, as is Lady Macbeth. So in your fate and free will essay, if I were an examiner marking it, I probably would mark down an interpretation taken by Mr. SALLES. I would look for examples, yes, of one paragraph dedicated to Macbeth, how he tries to subvert his position on the natural hierarchy by becoming king. So he tries to control his fate, and of course God punishes him. Lady Macbeth, of course, also tries to control her fate as a woman. She's supposed to be a woman who has kids, who stays in the kitchen, doesn't tell her husband what to do. She doesn't do that. She tries to also subvert her position on the natural hierarchy to become queen. God punishes her. Who actually is rewarded? Macduff, because Macduff carries on following his fate as just the Thane of Fife. He kills the king, but then hands the crown back over to Malcolm and restores the divine right of kings. The message is that we should accept our fates. And of course, remember, this was written at a time where if anyone was ambitious and they were rewarded, well, this is also going to destabilize society. This is obviously Jacobean society, or you can call it also Elizabethan society. Okay, that's my perspective. Okay, so obviously, guys, up to you to decide who you, and this is obviously why I also wanted Mr. SALLES to join me, because sometimes it's good to have a different teacher's perspective, and then you can decide what works for you, discard the rest, okay?
So there's one thing I need to add.
Go on.
The examiners are not allowed to mark you down for an interpretation, as long as you justify it. So they can totally disagree with you. I know psychologically they might not like it, but they're not allowed to. As long as you justify it, that's the glory of literature, is that you are allowed different interpretations as long as you back them up. But that doesn't mean one interpretation is right and one is wrong. But so don't be scared.
Yeah, don't be scared, guys. Sorry, but yeah, don't be scared. Okay, right. So should we call
It's
it a
your
day?
live show.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to call it a day because tomorrow I'm going to be live again. For those of you that are keen to do a bit more Macbeth, I'm going to be doing another live, just another final last minute revision live. Literally just a mind map, and more so just the last minute quotations, last minute context, last minute themes. And also what I might do actually, in fact, I'm probably going to do that. I'm going to put a poll and just see, do you guys also maybe want to also add and layer in maybe Christmas Carol, last minute revision, Jekyll and Hyde, whatever, okay? I love teaching Jekyll and Hyde, but nobody hardly ever wants to revise that. So maybe not Jekyll and Hyde, okay? So tomorrow from, I'm going to say 4:30 p.m, I'll be live again for just 1 hour. That's why we're wrapping up today. And I shall see those of you guys who want to get that last minute revision in tomorrow on YouTube again before Monday when we have the GCSE Literature Paper 1 exam.
What's in the description?
Oh, and in the description, guys, you can download, right? So I put together literally like a free pack which you can download with all the codes, context, all of that you need for Macbeth and Christmas Carol. That's for Literature Paper 1. And
I've
Mr.
got
Salles.
free essays, grade 7 and some grade 9 for most of the texts, including Macbeth. Check it out in the description.
All right, guys. Bye-bye. I'm going to now figure out how to end today's live, guys. Okay, so
say goodbye to the last person who's commented, Eve Gracie.